Iris, would you please introduce yourself and tell us when and where you were born?
Okay, this is Iris Wolfson. I was born right here in Philadelphia, back in many moons ago. We'll just say that.
Um,
August 13th, 46, long
yeah, I
time
think that
ago.
that's great. Okay,
Yes.
so tell us briefly, like about your childhood, let's say your ethnic background, siblings. What kinds of influence do you think there was that led you to the career you took?
Well, good question. My mom was sick a lot of my growing up, and I think that probably led me towards a healthcare professional.
Hmm.
Um, I actually really wanted to do was to be a social worker, but my parents couldn't afford college, and I did get in a scholarship to nursing school, so that kind of pushed me in that direction.
I see.
And uh,
Did you
I
have,
had
go ahead.
an older sister. I had an older sister and a younger brother. So I was a middle child, and we grew up in, well, Southwest Philadelphia, which was kind of a rough area until I was around 9. And then we moved into Mount Airy, which was an up and coming area of Philadelphia at the time.
Mhm.
And um, that's the story.
You went to nursing school, but you got interested in women's health, right?
I did, right from the get-go. I won an award for maternal child health and psychiatric nursing when I graduated from nursing school.
Oh, wow.
And I actually wanted to go right into labor and delivery, but there were no openings when I graduated. So I
Hmm.
worked in med surg for a little bit. And then I started to teach childbirth education classes because I was always very interested in childbirth. I remember in nursing school, I did a paper on natural childbirth, which back in the 60s was not very prevalent. But
Right.
it's kind of always my interest was women's health and birth. So that's kind of how I pursued it.
I see. But you did get into birth stuff after your medical surgery years.
I did. I did a stint in med surg for about a year, which was enough. And then I became a childbirth educator and taught childbirth education classes. And I remember working part-time in an abortion clinic
Mm.
when abortion was not even yet quite legal. I believe it was 1973, maybe.
That's when
70,
it became legal. Yeah.
yeah, 72, 73. There was a clinic that opened in Philadelphia, and I felt like I wanted to support the effort. And I remember starting as a volunteer. I volunteered as a counselor, and then I wound up working in the clinic before I went to Scotland to become a midwife.
Wow. So what clinic was that? I'm just curious.
I think it was it called Philadelphia Family Planning? I don't remember. I think it had Philadelphia in its name, but it was
Hmm.
the first clinic in Philadelphia to offer abortion services, and it was just abortion. That
Oh,
was
really? Mm.
that was the whole clinic. Yeah, that's all that they did. And it was one of the most wonderful places I ever worked because everybody was on the same page and we were all wanting to help women have what they needed to have. And I remember I just loved working there.
Wow. So did you actually perform any abortions or not at that time?
No, I did not. No, I assisted, with the physicians, but I was a nurse and we didn't do abortions.
Right, right.
It was
Um,
doctor.
but you went on to midwife school. Now this is what year would you say?
I went to midwifery school in 1974.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I actually went to Scotland to study midwifery.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
yeah. And because I just thought it was where the art of midwifery grew. And unfortunately, we were in Edinburgh and it was not at all what I had anticipated it to be. It was very hierarchical. You'd almost had to salute the doctors in the whole. It was a very,
No.
yes, it was a very different experience than what I had hoped for. And I actually quit the program because it was just so not what I wanted. And instead, I went to the art college and I studied tapestry weaving and ceramic arts and lived in Scotland for about 3 years. And it was when I
Hmm.
came back from Scotland that I actually applied to midwifery school here in the States. And
Oh,
so I didn't actually get my midwifery degree till 80 or 81.
and was that in Philadelphia also?
That was in Newark, the University of Medicine in Newark, New Jersey.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
not too far, but not super close either.
Yeah, it was tough because I had a young child, a 1 year old, and I was taking the train to and from. I'd try and do all my studying on the train, and then I'd come home and I had this little 1 year old to deal with, but it was a great experience actually.
Ah,
Much better than the experience in Scotland that I
okay. So I believe you told me you did home births. Was that right from the beginning?
I started to do home births before I went to midwifery school.
Oh, really?
Yes, when I came back from living in Scotland in 1976, I started to teach childbirth classes and I worked in a local hospital as a health educator for their maternal infant care project. And there I met someone who was doing some home births. And I was very interested. That was why I went to Scotland, because I wanted to do home births. And so I got together with her and several other young women who were teaching childbirth education classes for a group called the Association for Childbirth at Home. And we
Hmm.
supported each other. I was the only real medical person in the crew. I was the nurse. The others were lay midwives we were teaching each other really. And we had a wonderful physician at the time who had done home births himself, and he supported us. So
Wow.
he helped to teach us, and we taught each other, and we were learning and working at the same time and supporting women who wanted to have home births. So I actually started doing home births in 1976, and it wasn't until 81 that I got the actual midwifery degree.
I see. So, were obviously people were not nervous about doing it at home.
No, they were people who that's what they wanted. They really didn't not want the hospital experience. And
Uh-huh.
I understood that. I had
Yeah.
worked in hospitals and saw what happened there. So
Right.
I'm happy to support their choices.
Oh, yeah. Wow. And they went well, I'll assume.
For the most part, there obviously are times when things go wrong, and I always had backup plans and emergency plans if we needed to bring them in. And I always carried emergency equipment with me, and I did it in as safe a way as possible. And
Hmm.
I love those years. There was something about delivering a baby in the home and in the bed where it was conceived that's just very, very special for families.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
was gifted to have my own two babies born at home.
Oh,
So
you did. With
full
friends
circle.
delivering.
Yes, my midwifery pals.
That's super. Um, so then you got your actual certificate, I guess it's called, midwifery.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And did your practice change then at that point?
It changed only in that I no longer saw patients in my home at the time. I had a little office then, and I also was able to offer gynecologic services, which I hadn't really done before because I wasn't educated in that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I was only educated in birth. So it expanded my ability to support women in gynecology as well. My practice always involved nutrient support and herbal support and homeopathy. It's kind of, that's my bent has always been alternative medicine, integrating it with Western medicine when needed, but my go-to is alternative. So I was pretty skilled and knowledgeable, I would say, about how to deal with things in a way that was not Western medicine strictly.
I see. Like what? Give us an example.
Well, if someone had, say, instead of a yeast infection, if they had a bacterial infection, garlic is a very good source of antibacterial and anti-fungal as well. And then there are herbal douches that can be done, and there's nutrient supports, vitamin A for mucous membrane health, and vitamin D for immune support, a number of different things that can be utilized.
That are more.
There's homeopathy as well, which is another whole system of medicine.
Right. But it's more natural products, is what I'm hearing you say.
Exactly. To support the body's own ability to heal itself. I've always been a proponent of that, we all are self-healing, that we can heal our own bodies given the right time, place, and supports.
Wow.
So that's always my first go-to, and sometimes you need other things, and I'm open to that as well. But I always like to support the body's own ability to heal itself first.
And when you say homeopathy, were you trained in that as well?
I did a number of different workshops, and so it was through the workshops in women's health care that I learned most of what I know about homeopathy. And through working with it through trial and error.
Oh, so after you didn't want to do home births anymore, or did you continue home births? I'm not quite sure of the chronology.
I did home births for probably 30 years.
Oh.
Yeah, and towards the end of my birth practice, I also incorporated hospital births because I had a number of patients that I had seen through the years for gynecology who for either risked out of home birth or weren't comfortable with home birth that I wanted to support. And so I also offered hospital birth for about the last 10 years of my practice.
Yeah, once hospitals started allowing midwives to be in their hospital, right?
Exactly. And I was one of the first.
Oh, okay. In Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any sort of memorable experience about a home birth besides your own that you would like to tell us about?
Oh my goodness. That's a hard question for me to pull out of my brain. A memorable birthday.
Well, how about your grandchildren? You told me about that.
Oh, well, that was certainly a memorable birth, and that was after my time helping clients, but my granddaughter was born in California, and my daughter-in-law and son asked if I would be there and catch the baby. And so as I came into that hospital, they were very open and willing and accepted me. And they said, of course, there was a midwife who was taking care of her. And so she gave me the go ahead. And so really I got to deliver my little granddaughter, which was for me, it felt like my entire life's work was about that moment in time.
Wow, I got the chills. I'm not kidding.
It was amazing. And my husband was present for the birth.
Really?
Yeah.
The whole gang.
The whole gang was there, and it was just a magical, magical moment to have this little girl pop into my arms.
Oh my gosh. Whoa.
Yeah. And then I got to do a repeat performance this past December with my younger son who lives in Philadelphia. And his wife had a little boy, and I got to deliver him as well.
Wow.
So it just felt like
incredible.
Crowning glory and blessing of my birthing days.
Wow. Now I know you did some training throughout your career, right? Didn't you go to Europe or somewhere overseas?
Yeah, I went to Tibet. Well, I worked in Peru first. I've been to Peru 3 different times working with a shaman. They're doing
Hmm.
shamanic work. So I do some shamanic work in my
What
gynecology.
is that? What is that? Explain.
Well, that's I drum. So I drum, and the sound of the drum takes you into an expanded state of consciousness where information can come in and is more easily accessible from other realms of consciousness. And so I use that a lot. I did used to use it a lot in my birth practice with women, and I use it now in my gynecologic practice when people are having issues or concerns or just want some support for something that they're going through that they don't seem to quite understand, or
Hmm.
they just felt like they needed help from a spirit realm or some other way of looking and
Hmm.
seeing what's happening. So that was the beginning of the end of my birth years. Was when I went to Peru for the first time, because I went for about 6 or 7 weeks and studied with a shaman there, and I went back several times. And so that was kind of the beginning of another part of the alternative practice that I now have and can offer.
Hmm.
So that was very thrilling for me. And then many years later, I was offered an opportunity to go to Tibet to teach midwives in a very, very rural area up in the Himalayan, high in the
Wow.
Himalayan. It was pretty remarkable. I could barely breathe. It took a
Right,
while,
right. Wow.
but it was, in a little village where there were several women who were doing births for the women in the village and in the community. And so I was teaching them safe home birth practices. And then I went back a second time to Tibet, where I was doing that, as well as we traveled to a lot of different nomadic communities in the Himalayas. And I was able to offer healthcare services because there was no healthcare there at
Nothing.
all. And so I was offering healthcare. I would go into a community and there would just be long, long lines, day after day after day, of people for coming, some support or, help with their problems.
Yikes.
Yeah.
This, you may not know this at all, but I'm curious if they had methods of contraception that you knew of.
It was limited because they were so high up in the Himalayas, and there were no clinics, there were no hospitals, there were no doctors, there was no drugstores, there was nothing to
Right.
go to. So it was a very, very limited amount of
Uh-huh.
reproductive support there.
I see. So they didn't use, like, I know indigenous people in this country, used herbs. There were different
Yeah,
groups that learned what had different properties,
right.
but you don't know that they did
They
necessarily.
did not. They used a lot of condoms when they used condoms.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so people who would come and teach and work there would bring supplies to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, like when I came, I brought a ton of condoms. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you, you know, it, it was a rough place. It was a rough place, and men did not have a lot of um, respect, I would say, for women. So women were often became pregnant when they were not wanting to become pregnant due to
Yeah,
lack of support from the
right.
men. So it was
But there
it was
was no such thing, as far as you knew, of trying to abort the pregnancy.
no, no, there's
Yeah.
not much help with that. No.
Wow. Did you ever get involved, like, with the Midwives Association, either nationally or in Pennsylvania?
A very little bit. I've always been averse to groups. So,
Oh.
I've never been good at that. Um, I had a group that I was involved with, which was the Association for Childbirth at Home.
Oh,
And so I was very involved with that group and with teaching through the years in conferences and things like that. But I tended to stay away from the traditional.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Traditional is kind of seen in different ways, but the legal aspects.
It's interesting you say traditional because a lot of people think midwife in and of itself is not traditional.
But it's very traditional. In fact, it's one of
Fact.
the oldest professions around.
Exactly.
So
Maybe the
traditional,
oldest.
right, exactly. So traditional midwifery is really what I practice. It
Uh,
was birth and it was one-on-one with women who learned from other women and taught other women. So
right.
that really was the tradition. And when the medical model came in, it became very different. So I kind of stayed away from it.
I see. Yeah, we lost midwives for a number of years there, but happy to
Yeah,
go back.
I'm
That's
glad we're
great.
back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. And so tell us a little about your practice now.
Well, my practice now is, I see women for fertility, women who are having issues, trying to conceive and having concerns about it or not being able to conceive. I see them for an integrative way of looking at what's going on. And so I work with fertility issues. I
Tell
don't
me
do,
what integrated process is.
well, I look at what's going on in their life and what their belief systems are and how they grew up and what they believe about birth and their bodies and what's happened in their bodies through their years and their
Hmm.
gynecologic history and their history of with their partners and their histories with themselves, and how they honor themselves and do they
Huh.
love themselves and just where are they in all of that. So a lot of the work that I do is really it's psychological, it's emotional work,
Huh.
um, and looking at their connection to their parents and to their mom and what mothering meant to them and what their mom meant to them and what their relationship was. So it's a lot of looking at the relational work um,
Oh,
that
wow.
goes on. Yeah. So it's a different way of kind of addressing fertility. And then there's a lot with nutrient support and lifestyle support and
Right.
herbs and all that, the
Oh,
physical as well.
so you do use herbs.
Oh yeah, I use herbs, I use vitamins, yeah.
Well, having gone through infertility myself, I wonder what were the herbs? What are some of them, I should say?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on the woman themselves and what their hormonal picture is. But like red clover is a really good herb for women's health. Um, I'd have to say it really depends on the
I
particular
see.
woman, what's going on with her, what herbs I might recommend.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah, different ones for different people. It depends if someone's very anxious, I might I might recommend L-theanine, for instance, or if someone's very depressed, I might work with Bach flower essences, which are very subtle, energetic essences of flowers that have effects on the emotional body.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it depends on each woman's presentation, what
Hmm.
I would say to them.
And you plan on to continue to do this, it sounds like. You're not retiring.
I'm not retiring. No, I'm really happy with the practice, and then the bulk of the practice is gynecology,
Right.
working with women's health and whatever is going on for them in their reproductive
Well,
um, system.
yeah. And do you have colleagues that are doing some of the same stuff that you communicate with?
Um, Not a lot, but I have a few. Yeah. And the physician that I work with is oriented towards alternatives as well. So that really helps a lot.
Oh, I didn't realize you worked with a physician, I guess, when needed, I guess.
When needed, yeah. I have my own practice in my own office, so I'm separate, but I can call her anytime and she's wonderful and very supportive.
Well, would you like to add anything at this point?
The only thing I was thinking about was very early on in my career when I was just a brand new nurse in Philadelphia. They had a clinic that I think it was called Help, and it was a free clinic.
Right.
It was for men and for women. And I remember working in that clinic and thinking it was a real eye opener for what women needed in healthcare that was not being offered. And it was a style of healthcare that was just full of humanity and compassion. And
Hmm.
I felt like it really was a wonderful way to look at healthcare, and it definitely started me off on a good track.
I see. So that was shortly after you finished nursing school?
It was very soon after nursing school. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That was fabulous that you
It was
landed there.
it was kismet, and it really informed my understanding of what healthcare should and can be.
Wow. So tell me what kinds of things you saw women not getting at that. And this we're talking in the late 60s, right?
In the late 60s. Yeah, they were just, people didn't listen to them. Women were not given voice at all.
Mhm.
Physicians would look at them and they would know what they needed, and they wouldn't hear them. They wouldn't look beyond anything but the physical. And they weren't interested in what came before or what it meant, or they just weren't interested in any of the emotional, mental components of who we are as human beings.
Right.
And there was very little compassion, very little compassion. It was just bing, 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 you're
Wow.
done, out the door.
We're still saying trust women, and we're not quite there.
Yeah,
But I appreciate what you've done to move us in that direction.
yeah, and women need to understand that they should trust themselves.
Ah,
No one knows better than us what we need and who we are and what comes
wow.
from within, so really helping women to empower them to trust their own being and their own selves and their own thoughts. And that
Right.
seems to be a really missing piece.